Hey team, how we doing? Kate Lincoln-Goldfinch here from Lincoln-Goldfinch Law, here with you on Tuesdays in English, usually at 8:30 in the morning, but today we're coming at you a little bit later than usual. And on Thursdays, as a reminder, we have the same show, but in Spanish. Well, it ends up being a little bit different because we take live questions, but same topic. We spend 30 minutes together, cover the news of the week, particularly within the realm of immigration, because there's so many headlines coming at you. It can be a lot. It can be a lot to keep up with. And I know that a lot of people are attempting to protect their sanity these days by not paying attention to every headline that you see. And so going to your trusted sources to help you distill and interpret what's happening. I read Heather Cox Richardson's newsletter every day, which one of the things she does is she'll say, like, don't read this one before you go to bed, or it's okay to read this one tonight, which I really appreciate. I also really appreciate Steve Vladek's blog. He's a constitutional law professor at Georgetown, I think. He went to DC. He was at UT Law. But these are some of my sources for staying up with things without like constantly reading all of the headlines and stressing myself out. So hopefully I have become and will remain a source for you with headlines about immigration, because there's, as you know, a whole heck of a lot of those these days. And I've been reflecting a lot lately on how far we've come. I was visiting with a friend of mine who's lived in Europe now for almost 15 years. And this person was a practicing immigration lawyer in the United States before they moved to Europe. And so I was just visiting with her and I was telling her what it's like these days to practice immigration and what's happening with asylum seekers, and that asylum seekers who are literally in legal process, going to court, may have even entered legally, are still at risk for going into court, having their case dismissed and getting picked up and being placed in detention and just being taken out of the court process. I mean, it's an absurdity. This point where we have arrived is an absurdity, and we have fallen so very far. And somebody asked me recently, I can't remember if it was an interview or what it was, but somebody said, like, what's the one thing we could do to drive immigration forward? And I was like, we just need to hit rewind and get back to where we were in January of 2025, because the attacks that the Trump administration and Stephen Miller have made on the immigrant community and going after people who are doing everything legally, right? That's like this fiction that they're going after people who are lawbreakers. I mean, it's so untrue. And that just the fast, but methodical attack on immigrant communities has been, it's just been such a barrage. And, they started with birthright citizenship and naturalized citizens and going after green card holders and going after other people in legal status, TPS holders, dreamers, people who entered on parole, and then they wanted to detain more people, and then they start going after, people in asylum process who are going to their check-ins or going to their court proceedings, and then they ramp up these interior raids and actions, and especially target places that are, sanctuary or don't necessarily cooperate with the feds. And so that's, a lot of the headlines that you're seeing right now is related to that. And I think it really, it puts state and local jurisdictions in a real conundrum, especially state and local jurisdictions that understand the benefit of the immigrant community, that want to protect the immigrant community. And the right thing to do is to stand up as a county or a city or a state and say, no, we're not going to allow ICE, to come in and infiltrate, and we're not going to cooperate. But loudly, not cooperating, then of course draws the ire of Trump and the whole ICE agency. And so a lot of, brave places like the state of California and the city of Los Angeles and the city of Boston, Chicago and Illinois, and these places that are, bravely and loudly standing up for their own immigrants, are facing retaliation. And that is, I mean, it's so clear what it is. And I hope everybody sees it for what it is, that this is the Trump administration bullying all of us and the immigrant community. And it's really exhausting. And I think that, I've been reflecting a lot. I've traveled a little bit. You might have seen, I wasn't going live last week. So we did some replays, but reflecting on the decision of the Supreme Court to essentially allow racial profiling right before, Mexican independence, actually coming out with a decision from the highest court in the land, telling federal law enforcement that it's okay for you not to have actual reasonable suspicion to arrest someone anymore under the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution. It's okay for you to gather up things like somebody's race or their language or even just their accent or just the fact that they are, at Mexican independence celebration or they're hanging out in a parking lot or at a car wash. Just that is enough for someone to be detained. Now, and I know that we all felt it when it happened, but like the enormity of that decision out of the Supreme Court cannot be glossed over. I mean, we have to be continuing to talk about this. That is a shift in our nation, in our constitutional protections, when the Supreme Court of the land told federal law enforcement, yes, you may racially profile when you detain people. It's like the more time that passes since that decision, the more shocking it is somehow. I don't know if you guys agree with me on that, but that's where I am today after having taken some days of reflection on immigration. Let me get to your news of the week, and I go ahead and start putting your questions in the comments. I see that some have come in from Franklin. Thank you for your comments. You can do Spanish. You can ask questions in Spanish. I'll answer them in Spanish. My Spanish show is on Thursdays, but I can do, Spanish questions on Tuesdays. One thing I want to tell you guys, this is a news summary. There was a big decision in the Board of Immigration Appeals, that is the appellate court over the immigration courts. And what they said is that from now on, immigrants who are detained are not eligible for release on bond if they entered the country without a visa, which is many, if not the majority of them. So that was a big decision that completely changed the way it goes when people get detained. I do expect some, appeal of that and maybe some shifting of that, but for right now, that's the policy. So a couple things to know about that. Number one, protecting oneself against detention is more important now than ever, given this policy, because a lot of people now who get detained won't be released on bond. What does it mean to protect yourself? Do all the things that we've been talking about, right? Since the election, consult with an immigration lawyer, have all your papers at the ready, apply for relief if you're eligible. Like if you are eligible for a work permit, a green card, a T visa, U visa, VAWA, and you've met with a lawyer or someone like me, and they've said, yes, you're eligible, please take this opportunity to apply for the benefit that you're eligible for while you are eligible. One of the best things you can do to protect yourself is apply for protection. And I see a lot of people holding off for, very understandable reasons. Like, I don't want to, submit myself to immigration. I don't want to get all this, I don't really want to deal with ICE authorities right now or immigration authorities. And I understand that. And we are still getting people's work permits, people's green cards, people's citizenship approved on a daily basis. And each time we do that, that is one more family protected against this insanity that's happening. And so do apply if you're eligible. The other thing I want to say is that we're still, even though summer's over, we're still doing free consultations for anybody around the country. Immigration law is federal, and we can represent people all over the 50 United States. We are a virtual law firm. We do virtual consultations. We can do in person if you're in Central Texas, but we also, most of our consultations are virtual. We can represent detained people all over the country. So if you or a loved one has been detained, disappeared, is in detention, and you need some advice, just reach out. We are not charging for consultation, and that is our gift to the community when all of this is going on. So feel free to just DM me on the social medias, or message the firm. Okay, so that's that. Okay. News of the week, as promised. I see a lot of questions coming in. Thank you. I will get to those in a second. So, quick note. I mean, this is a headline that I don't love, because here's what the headline reads: After rescinding protections, ICE is moving to deport immigrants who are victims of crime. I mean, I think that news is, drafted so that it'll grab your attention. There was a memo. It was a memo and not an executive order in the early part of the Trump presidency, and like in January, that said we're not extending the same protections to crime victims that we did before. We're still not seeing our U visa applicants picked up, but there was a guy who was a U visa applicant. He was a robbery victim, and he was testifying, and he was detained. And so there was a news article that now they're going after U visa holders. That is not what we're seeing in practice, and I haven't heard my colleagues talking about that either. If you are an immigration lawyer and you're watching this live stream and you have had a different experience, please let us know. We want to hear from colleagues as well. I talked about this in the intro. ICE crackdowns are intensifying across the country. Of course, we know about Los Angeles, California. We know about the threats to Chicago. We know about the takeover of DC. They're now focusing on Boston. But my husband was actually doing some canvassing in Austin today, talking to some businesses, and they were seeing some activity in Austin. So, I mean, they're all over the place. They got all that funding from Congress. They're everywhere. Next thing, Fort Bliss is going to be the largest detention center in the nation. It's going to house up to 5,000 people. It's an Army base. It was the site of Japanese internment during World War II. Really, really bad history. Is open, is housing immigrants. There have been some human rights reports, and they have found many, many, many violations of people's human rights and ICE's own protocols, right, about medical care, ability to access attorneys, ability to contact family members, like all of the things that sort of structure just basic human rights of a person who's being detained. Won't surprise anybody here. Fort Bliss is received a failing grade from these human rights reports. And then, of course, ICE hasn't even responded, per the news article. ICE has threatened federal assault charges on anyone who attacks its officers. This one's tough, guys. I know it's really, really hard in these moments. We've talked about this before. The best thing I can share is that everybody needs to know how to be a really good witness. If you witness ICE detentions or apprehensions, get out your phone, record it, take notes, help talk to the person who's being detained. What's your name? What's your mom's name? What's her phone number? Who can I call? Remind them they have the right to remain silent, but don't physically interfere because that might get you arrested, but it might also increase the violence and get somebody shot. There was a murder of an immigrant who was fleeing. I don't know the details. I haven't dug into all the articles, but there was something about him driving away and the agent getting hurt, but he was killed in that incident. So the ICE agents are as on edge as the rest of us are. And law enforcement on edge is a volatile situation. So we got to be aware of that. Next headline: California nurses decry ICE presence at hospitals. That we know that safe locations, hospitals, domestic violence shelters, churches, schools, there are no secure locations anymore. ICE is going into hospitals in California. Let's leave with a little bit of good news. A U.S. judge blocked Trump from cutting migrants off of Head Start, including other programs. Oh, and another one, a judge blocks the effort to remove dozens of immigrant Honduran and Guatemalan children. We talked about that. There was that plane on the tarmac in the middle of the night. I think it was over Labor Day weekend. The plane got turned around, and that litigation's ongoing, but the protection of the those kiddos is continuing. So there you go. There's your questions, guys. All right, starting with Franklin, or let's see. Hold on, I have this thing in my window. There we go. I've been in the U.S. since I was 9 years old. Great. I now have a baby with a U.S. citizen, but we're not married. What are my options? Well, it depends on what state you're in. If you live in Texas, we have common law marriage, and I don't know how many of the states do. Last I checked, I think it was like a third of the states in the country have common law or informal marriage. What that means is that you can be legally married without, a wedding or even a marriage certificate. So in Texas, all that's required is that you hold yourselves out as a married couple and you live together. You intend to be married and you live together. It's good if you go register your marriage at the county, just so you have a piece of paper, but you don't have to go before a judge or a priest. You don't have to have a wedding. It's very easy to register a common law marriage. And another great thing about a common law marriage is you can pick the date that your marriage began. So if you've been living together for 3 years and you want to say we've been married for 2 of those 3 years, that's fine. You can register that date. One word of caution, though, is that you don't want to backdate your marriage to a previous year if you've already filed taxes separately, unless you intend to amend your taxes. I'm not a tax lawyer. I don't give tax advice online, but just keep tax filing joint, married or filing single, head of household, etc. But if you are living with your partner and you guys want to be married, you can just decide to be married. Now, if either one of you is legally married to somebody else, you cannot do that, right? You have to get a divorce from that other person. But in terms of your immigration case, see, you've been here for a long time. I'm curious if you have DACA or if you ever applied for DACA. If you've been here since you were 9, depending on when you got here, you probably are eligible for DACA. So we could look at that. Maybe we could apply for DACA initial for you, and then we could get going on the marriage-based case once you guys decide to get married. So there's a lot of pathways and intricacies to it, but there are definitely ways that we could help you get your green card through your relationship. As a permanent resident, can I petition for my minor daughter who lives with her father in Mexico? Sure. Yeah, you definitely can. If she's a minor, she'll be in the category for which there is about a 2-year wait. So you can petition for her and wait. I want to make sure she's not going to age out. She's not going to turn 21 during that wait time. So we need to check her age. You can also apply for your citizenship so that you don't have to wait for those 2 years. And also benefit is if you apply for citizenship, get it, and then petition for her age freezes when you apply for her, so that she's not ever going to age out. So again, this is what we want to do is get in a consultation, talk to you about your citizenship eligibility, talk about your daughter, how old she is, and how did you get your green card? Is there a way maybe that you could have included her in that petition? So I have more questions, but there are definitely ways that we can bring your daughter here for sure. My DACA expires soon, but I've had 2 misdemeanors. Will this affect my renewal? Yes, you cannot have 2 misdemeanors and still qualify for DACA, but not everything is a misdemeanor under DACA. We have to look at the record of conviction or the final disposition of the case. What was the crime? What was the disposition? And maybe we can argue that it wasn't a serious enough crime to disqualify you, even though you have 2 of them. So before you apply, we should take a look at your criminal history. If you can do an FBI background check and get the whole, you can get the charge from the law enforcement agency and then the final disposition, and we can see all of that in the FBI check. And that usually only takes 2 weeks or so. We can get that pretty quick, but I definitely want to make sure we apply for your DACA before it expires if you're eligible. So if you say it's expiring soon, we should talk really soon, because Dreamers need to really make sure that you guys are renewing your work permits. You're renewing your DACA before they expire, because if you let it lapse for too long, you are considered a DACA initial applicant. And although USCIS is receiving and accepting DACA initial applications, they're still not approving them until we get a decision from Judge Hainan. So anyway, all of that is to say, don't let your DACA lapse. That's not a good idea. If you have DACA, please do be renewing it. All right, I want to fix my papers for my parents, but they were told they need a waiver. We've been in this process for 3 years without progress. In April of this year, they were asked to submit the waiver. What should we do? Oh, man. So it sounds like maybe you guys didn't get a great consultation to start out with. Here's the problem. An adult child can petition for a parent, right? When a U.S. citizen child turns 21, they can petition for their parent. But if the parent entered without a visa, they're not eligible to adjust status to permanent resident, right? So they can't just file for a green card unless somebody petitioned for them before 2001, someone in the family has served in the armed forces, or there's been cruelty in the family, like this child was abusive to the parent. Those are the 3 ways that a parent who entered without a visa can adjust status without leaving the country. Otherwise, the process is the consular process where the child files for the parent and the parent has to leave the country, but they've got a bar to reentry when they leave for 10 years if they've been here for longer than a year. There's no waiver for that 10-year bar based on your child. That's how that works. So most of the time when we get cases for a consultation like this, where we've got a U.S. citizen child and parents who have been waiting all this time, if the parents enter without a visa and those exceptions don't apply, there's no way to go forward with the green card process. And most of the time we have to tell people there's not a whole lot we could do. Now, this day and age, we might want to go ahead and file the I-130 because so many, people are leaving and, detentions are happening, and getting that I-130 like filed and going has something going where you could bring the parent back more quickly. But I'm worried reading this question that they needed a waiver. They don't qualify for a waiver. And the lawyer didn't tell you that, or whoever was helping you didn't know that when you started the process. So we need a consultation and we'll take a look at everything. My asylum case was denied. Do I have any other options to stay in the United States? Well, first of all, you can appeal. So when you apply for asylum, you're either applying affirmatively or defensively. When you're affirmative, you mail your application and you go to an interview at the end of that. And then if they approve you, great, you have asylum. If they deny you, then you get referred to court. That is defensive asylum. So that's for people who were arrested at the border coming in, or for people who got referred after a denial. They're going before an immigration judge. And the judge is going to hear your testimony, and the prosecutor is going to be there, and there's cross-examination. It's a whole thing. I was just telling someone recently, like, what it takes for an asylum seeker to go through that process is really unimaginable. Like, someone's been traumatized. They've, fled violence in their country. They come here, they are subjected to an interview. They have to fill out their asylum application, tell their whole story, gather all this evidence, review everything. I mean, it is like a repeat. If you know anybody who suffered a trauma, the loss of a child, domestic violence, anything really hard, and it's hard for them to go back and revisit it and retell it. Well, that's what we make our asylum seekers do, like over and over and over again. And then at the end, they go to court and tell their whole story and get subjected to cross-examination. I mean, really is an incredible thing that asylum seekers do to get all the way through the process. And that's one of the many reasons that I have so much respect for asylum seekers. And I think it is such an absurdity that, right-wing people are always like, oh yeah, whatever, asylum, anybody can get asylum. It's like, no, it is one of the hardest things that people go through. But anyway, if your case was denied, I'm very sorry to hear that. And there is an appellate process that you have to file a notice of appeal within 30 days from the date of the decision. So that deadline is really important. You don't want to miss that deadline. And then you'll be with the Board of Immigration Appeals, the appellate court, and you file a brief. You definitely want a lawyer if you're appealing an asylum denial. All right, I am from Mexico, and I have been in the U.S. for 3 years. I entered with a tourist visa that is still valid. can I apply for work permit or residency? I'm assuming you entered with your tourist visa 3 years ago and you haven't left. If that's the case, you overstayed your visa. It expired after 6 months and now you are undocumented. You're what's called a visa overstay and you are accruing unlawful presence, and there's no way based on your visa entry to get legal status, but you could still potentially get legal status through family or humanitarian case like crime victim, trafficking victim, domestic violence victim, removal defense. Like there's still ways to apply for a work permit, but not based on the fact that you entered with a visa. So we should consult. We'll talk through how you got here, what your family situation is like, what your life has been like in the United States, and we'll let you know. And we will tell you, this is one thing that I really want people to know. We will tell you if you don't qualify for anything, because that's valuable information too. You need to know that. We do have a program called Luz en el Camino, which is for people who don't qualify for legal status right now. And what that does is it gives you a letter of representation that you can carry with you. This is this person, a client of Lincoln-Goldfinch Law. We give you a list of documents that we collect. We essentially help you prepare your emergency safety planning packet, okay? And then we have a direct line to an attorney should anything arise. Should you get detained? Should you want to get married? Should you want to leave the country? Like any of those things that come up, you'll have a direct line, and we've already formed and established a relationship. And the reason we actually did this during the first Trump administration, then we stopped it and we brought it back because what happens is when somebody gets detained, it's craziness, right? We're trying to find the person. We're trying to figure out what they want. We're trying to find all the documents. We're trying to figure out like who is their emergency contact, who you would not believe when somebody's detained, how many people get involved and have different ideas about what should happen with this person. You know, the person who's detained themselves, they want out of detention. They want to go back to their country as quickly as possible. Their wife might be on board. Their mom might be like, no, you keep that person. It's like, it's a wildness, the family situation when somebody is detained. And this is why I always say, like, the family needs to get together, have a family plan, think through this stuff, talk to each other, understand. It's almost like an estate plan. Like you have to have the brave and hard conversation so that everybody understands the wishes of the immigrant should they be detained. And that's part of what we do in the Luz en el Camino, is help you think through all that and prepare it. So if you get detained, we already know what you want. We already know what to do, and we can act a whole lot more quickly, because we can lose a week or two just getting our bearings, you know, when it's a brand new person who is detained and we've never talked with them or their family before. Hi, Arla. Thank you for being here with me. Spousal petition, new changes with immigration. Everything is the same. The one difference for spousal petitions is that they're now interviewing all I-130 cases for spouses. And this is because, of course, they claim that there's more fraud and they want to make sure everybody's in a valid marriage. We have been doing interviews for decades, thousands and thousands of interviews. We know what we're doing. And if you are actually living with your spouse in a real marriage, you don't have to worry about an interview. You're going to be fine. Typically, they're very routine. Spousal interviews are like, how did you meet? You know, pictures of the wedding. Were your parents there? Are they supportive? Where do you live? Where do you work? It's like standard. It's almost like if you went to dinner with a new couple of friends and you're like trading stories about like how we met and what it was like in the beginning. You're just like getting to know each other. That's kind of what a marriage interview is like, although it's like with an immigration officer. It's not quite as fun as like a new double date. If they suspect fraud, it's a whole different situation. If they suspect that it's a fraudulent marriage, they will separate the couple and they'll interview husband separate from wife. And there's no like list of questions to prepare for, right? It's whatever the examiner wants to ask you, you know, that isn't too inappropriate. So it could be like, where do you celebrate your anniversaries? Where'd you go on your last vacation together? What color is your sofa? What kind of toothbrush does your husband use? I mean, like random stuff. So you really do need to be actually living together, sharing a life. I've said this before. I'll say it again. I've talked to plenty of people who love an immigrant, right? Like your bestie is an immigrant and you think like, oh, I'm just going to marry this person. I want to help them. I'm going to marry them. I love them enough to marry them, but I'm not actually going to like share my life with this person. Don't do it, because there are criminal and civil penalties for marriage fraud for both people. Everybody gets in big trouble. And here's the way to conceptualize it. Lots of people get married before they might naturally do so because of immigration. Immigration can be one of the reasons that you get married. Because like, I can't tell you how many people I know who got married young, got married and they'd only been dating a few months. They would otherwise have waited probably years, but in order to stay together, they decided to get married early. But they're in love and they live together. That's fine. What's not fine is if you want to help your buddy out, but you're not actually going to live together and share a life with them. That's fraud. That's essentially how to figure it out. But there's a lot of different ways that people do marriage. A lot of people don't share the same bedroom. There's unconventional marriages. And as long as it's legal in the jurisdiction where it occurred and it's a valid, bona fide, real marriage, you're okay. Okay, I think this is maybe our last question, and then I'll get to the tip of the week, and then we'll see each other on Thursday. En español, how can I petition for my father? He has had TPS for over 20 years. I'm a 28-year-old U.S. citizen. First of all, I'm so glad that you're doing this, because TPS, as we know, is getting slashed and burned by the Trump administration. TPS holders from Honduras, from Nicaragua, from Nepal, from Venezuela, who have been legally in this country, contributing to society with work permit, committing no crime, are under attack by the Trump administration, and they need to get TPS holders need to get some other type of legal status that is not TPS in order to stay here legally. So if you're a U.S. citizen, you can petition for your dad. We're going to have the issue that I discussed a few moments ago about his entry. So we'll need to consult about whether there's a way to get him advanced parole so he has a legal entry, or whether there's some other type of eligibility. We'll get to that in a consultation. All right, guys. So that was it. Thanks for all your questions. I appreciate you being here with me as always. I look forward to seeing and talking to you guys every week. As you know, it's exhausting to watch everything that's going on and feel helpless. It's the worst. And I know that people get a little tired of what can I do? I'm not an immigration lawyer. I don't work in politics. Like, what can I do? And we all know, like, yeah, rally, protest, call your legislators, donate to campaigns, make sure you register to vote, go out and help people register to vote, like, be civically active. But I try to give you every week something else, because it's really the weaving in throughout your days of kindness, compassion, and love for your fellow humans in this country that is the strongest action we can take. The powers, the dark powers in this country want division and hatred. There's actually whole movements dedicated to that. So ultimately, the bottom line thing that we need to do is come together and love each other and take care of each other. So that's what I'm all about. That's why I'm running for office. If you follow me, I'm running for House District 50 in the Texas legislature, which is Northeast Austin. But I will fight for the district and the entire state of Texas as an elected official. And I have a website, klg4texas.com. Go there. This is your action tip of the week. Go there and sign up to get involved, and we'll put you to work. Phone calls, block walking, etc. We're going to get creative. We're going to take the bus out to the district and register people to vote and all that. So we're going to be hanging out in HD 50 until the primary, which is in March. And I'd love to have you with me. Even if you're not a resident of the district, you can still become a part of our movement of unity, compassion, kindness, love, courage, integrity, all the things that are good and right. And these good forces will win if we stick together. So anyway, that's it. I'm out. Thanks for being here with me. See y'all el jueves en español.